going to hit record. And I'm going to hand over to Bonnie and Denise. Over to you both.
Thank you so much, Erin, and hello everybody. It's so lovely to see some familiar names coming up on the registration list there. I feel like I haven't seen some of you in quite some time now, so it's nice that you're able to join us today. Thanks so much. So I'm Dr. Bonnie Dean, I'm from UAW and on the ACEN Board of Directors, and Denise and I will be presenting this together. We'll do a few slides each and take turns. So like Erin said, this is the second webinar in a series around GOS data, looking at different types of will on students' perceived preparedness for work. What I want to do is start out by saying this is going to be a webinar which is a really good news story for will. You will see that in the large data set that was analysed for this particular webinar, you'll see that across different types of will, there's quite large volumes of data which are positively referencing students' perceived preparedness for work through these various types of work integrated learning activities. So this webinar will focus on analysis of data looking at the contribution to employability, to career development learning, and the development of skills as well. And there's three different types of work integrated learning that we'll be looking at. There's will in the workplace, there's will that's not in the workplace, and there's global will. So kind of the questions that we were looking at here was, do different types of will influence how well graduates feel their course prepared them for their current job? And the second one was, do different types of will impact on how graduates perceive skill development at university? So we'll go through analysis of the data now, and then at the end we'll offer some reflections and some key takeaways as well. Okay, Denise, let's get into it.
Thanks, Bonnie. Morning, everyone. Okay, so just a bit of background, and for those of you that were here in the last session that we ran on the influence of will on employment outcomes, you'll be familiar with this already. But for those of you that haven't, ACEN included 5 items in the 2020 Graduate Outcomes Survey, and those 5 items are actually appearing in the survey that's running at the moment. So I think they're on their 3rd wave of gathering data as we speak. So just as you can see there, data were collected at 3 different time points. You've got the end of 2019, when the world was a different place, and then we have February 2020 and May 2020. 30 participating member universities, which has increased to 31 this year, and as Erin said, we have around 80,000 graduates completing the survey, although there's in the analysis today and the presentation, you'll see that some of the presentation only applies to domestic graduates, some only applies to those actually completed will. So we'll clarify that as we go through, so that sample size varies throughout the presentation really. Okay, so in terms of the items themselves, Bonnie's touched on this already, some of it. The first one is around what types of will, asking graduates what types of will they participated in. There's no easy way, as we know, of classifying different forms of will, but we had to do it some way. So we classified them into workplace-based, which in this presentation, just to make it easy, we refer to it as work-based will. Will that's not based in the workplace, which is non-workplace will in this presentation, and global will. We also, the second question, which we referred to in the earlier webinar, which is around participation extracurricular activities that are targeting student employability. We're not covering those today, but you can see what the item related to there. We also, the third item is around participation in paid work while they actually studied. The fourth one was around the influence of will on employment outcomes. And then the fifth item, which is really what we're drilling down to today, is the extent to which different types of will help to improve these 4 different dimensions of employability. Now, these are broadly based on scales of self-perceived employability, and yes, we know that employability is very complex and there are lots of different angles to it. So we had to keep the items relatively brief, so we have little chance of covering all those different dimensions of employability. But the ones that we focused on were the extent to which graduates felt that WIL helped them to improve in developing professional capabilities for improved job prospects, those being things like communication, teamwork, etc. Awareness of other organisations where they feel that they could seek work, their appeal in the labour market, and also the contact network for improved job prospects. So those were the 4 different areas that we drilled down into, and which really are one of the key foci for today. So in terms of participation, you can see there, this is really how the sample divided up across the cohorts. At the top there, you've got the 3 different course levels: undergraduate, postgraduate coursework, and then postgraduate research. And notably, the sample is a lot smaller for the postgraduate research graduates. And then you've got here the participation in WIL. So here, this number we have that shows that there's over half of the undergraduates participated in any form of WIL, compared to with the 43.7 that didn't. And you can see that as you go through, and there's a clear difference here. And this is all in the summary report that's available on our on the ACEN website. But you can see here participation obviously was much lower for HDR graduates, although that might be a very different story in a couple of years, given the drive to include placements or internships into HDR courses, which is currently happening. So that just gives you an idea about the sample before we start. So first of all, what we're looking at here is, it says all levels, so it's all different course levels, and you can see we're presenting below with the bars in the chart present for each of the different course levels there. This is the influence of WIL on professional capability development. So students graduates were asked to think about the activities, the WIL activities they completed, and to indicate the extent to which they agreed or disagreed with 4 different statements, and they relate to those 4 different items. So the first one was my professional capabilities for improved job prospects. So what you'll see here is those graduates that either rated as agree or strongly agree. So obviously we want that to be as high as possible. And the results are very positive. You can see here that overall, 82% of all graduates from all the different course levels agreed or strongly agreed that WIL positively influence their development of professional capabilities and for improved job prospects. We try to link it specifically to career there. You can see some differences by course level, that being that those from the postgraduate level tend
Denise, we've just lost your audio.
She just has dropped out there, Bonnie. Are you okay to take over?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Denise, when you come back, please just let us know. So as Denise was saying, there is some very minor differences by about 5 percentage points between undergrad and postgrad research, but you'll notice on this one that postgrad research...
Hello, can anyone hear me or see me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just, obviously jumped out there. I'll try and pick up where I left from. This slide basically confirms the strong links that we know exist between professional capability development and work integrated learning, and that's been evidenced in multiple studies that I'm sure many of us have read in the last over the years. Moving on and looking at bachelor level only, the purpose of this slide or analysis was really for us to break down and look at the relative impact of the different forms of WIL. And you can see there the strong impact for global WIL and also work-based WIL, which is your internships, placements, etc., relative to non-workplace-based WIL, which is more your project-based learning, consulting, etc. So that's things that are done virtually or done on campus. Saying that, the effect is positive. It's just slightly lower, but either way, that's a positive result. It might be a point here, wondering. Sorry, my slides keep going. I don't know if I'm still connected, but I can't see any slides. Don't know if anyone else is experiencing the same problem.
We can still see everything, Denise.
Okay. I can't see anything, so I'm just going to open it up on my own.
We can move the slides for you if you like. You're still on the bachelor slide.
I just can't see them. I can't see them at all. But that's okay. It's come back now. Sorry. At work, so I don't know why there's an issue with my wife, with the connection. One point here is there genuinely a difference between skill development in non-workplace will and the other forms of will? Is it perhaps a situation where there might be less reflection built into those non-workplace will offerings? That's just a point for people to consider. And really, I would encourage people to look at their own institution's data, and you'll be able to drill down to your own area as well, to get a grasp of that. But it might be that students aren't thinking about what they've learned in their experience, so that leads into the types of ratings that graduates are then giving off when they come to complete the survey. So moving on to the second dimension, which is around awareness of other organisations to work out. And you can see, again, the results are positive. Around 3/4 of the graduates either agreed or strongly agreed that we had a positive influence here, although it is slightly less in professional capabilities. Again, we can see the difference in the course level, postgraduate research being, very positive here. This is understanding where you might be able to secure work is a positive. Obviously, it's important for employability and it's important for future employment. And given the nature of the different types of will, we might expect to see what we can on this next slide, and that's that those forms of will which are not based in the workplace, where you might have lots of rich interaction with different internal and external stakeholders, they perhaps give you less insight into into other organisations that you might actually wish to work in. Global will, you can see positive here, which is good to see, and actually exceeds the percentage that agreed for those in work will. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Bonnie now. Hopefully my slides will keep working from here. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Denise. So what we're looking at now is the third dimension, where students were asked to indicate the extent to which they agreed or disagreed that the will activities that they participated in helped improve their appeal in the labour market. So this graph shows the portion of graduates who agreed or strongly agreed. And as you'll see by the purple bar on the far right-hand side, they're just under 2/3 of all graduates surveyed said participation in will positively improve their appeal in the labour market. So this is a total or all levels, which includes undergrad, postgrads at course and research as well. You'll notice that global will is a little bit higher, and it's the same for the next slides as well. And that global will is a bit higher, so that's something that we really need to think about here. That global will is actually being shown here to have quite a perceived positive impact for students who are participating in that experience. So we can have a think about why that might be for this particular one in relation to appeal in the labour market. Is it because they feel like this appeal is now internationalised because they've had this cross-cultural experience or cross-country experience, perhaps? Maybe that's what it is. We do notice here that non-workplace based will experiences is slightly lower across all levels. And this is those which are either campus-based or virtual and project-based learning. So that's something that we need to consider there as well, that perhaps is not as high. You'll see there's actually a 10 percentage point difference there between global will and non-workplace-based will for perceptions of appeal in the labour market. So what we did then is just look at the bachelor and break it down into work integrated learning types. So again, even with the undergrad students, undergraduate global will is still quite high, and non-workplace will is actually just a bit smaller there, but not as dramatic as it was in the previous slide looking at totals. So the fourth and final dimension that students were asked to look at on agree to disagree scale was the influence of will on contact networks for improved job prospects. So what we're looking at here is course levels, so undergrad, postgrad, and postgrad research. And similarly to other slides, postgrad research is really high, and there's quite a positive response there from those who participated in WIL activities from those in postgrad research courses. But look, overall, it's still just slightly less than 2/3 who either agree or strongly agree that their WIL experience was positive for expanding their networks and to improve their job prospects. So on the same one, but just looking at the bachelor again, looking at that total, which is purple, it's still just under 2/3 of graduates ranking strongly agree or agree. Once again, we've got global will right up there as well, so quite some strong positive responses there. And non-workplace based will is just a little bit smaller there. Now look, if we think about this, the types of modalities we have in non-workplace will include, say, projects and other sort of virtual experiences. Often students are in teams, so perhaps this actually does make sense. Perhaps the networks that they are exposed to aren't the same that, say, a student who's immersed in a workplace might have informally as they meet colleagues, as they go about those daily routines inside an organisation or community or industry partner. So this does make sense, but it's still 57.1%, which is really still positively received. Denise, this one's yours.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think we deserve a bit of a medal, by the way, for the old tongue twister with the workplace-based and non-workplace. It's quite tricky. We'll see. We're doing okay at the moment. So the second aspect that we looked at was the influence of will on qualification preparedness. So this is a question in the graduate outcome survey, which asks graduates overall, how well did your qualification prepare you for your job? So graduates rate, there's 4 options. It's not at all, not well, well, or very well. So this data that you can see here are those graduates that rated well or very well. And we're looking at the influence, or we're looking at how that distributed across graduates who did participate in WIL and those who didn't. Now, we've got very positive results here. I should also add that this, unlike the earlier slides that you saw where we have international students, we have domestic students and all course levels, graduates, not students, this only applies to domestic graduates and those that are working in full-time roles as well. So obviously that's why we've got a smaller sample here. So you can see basically across the board, the graduates who participated in any form of WIL, shown by the red circles there, essentially felt that they felt more prepared for work than those that didn't complete any WIL. So that's positive. If we look at the different levels, you can see here the difference between those that didn't complete any form of WIL and those that did and those that didn't was very high. It's around 13.1 percentage points at the undergraduate level. Again, positive postgraduate coursework is 11.6 percentage point difference. And at postgraduate research, again, there is a difference, but it's less, just over 5%. And you can see here as well the variation among the different types of WIL, which I won't go into too much detail here. I mean, there are some numbers that jump out here. You've got 90% for work-based WIL, but just being mindful of the sample size, remembering that we only had around 5,000 graduates that completed the GOS items, the GOS, from the postgraduate research cohort completing the GOS. So you've obviously got lower numbers here. And if you break that down to an institution level, and then obviously down to a course level, that's obviously going to become problematic. But that, in itself is obviously a very positive finding. So this is where we just to try and give you a sense of how this varies across discipline, and we focus on bachelor level for the reason of the sample size. So just to explain here, you've got these different bars. There are 4 different colours there. You've got your dark orange, which is work-based WIL. The green is non-workplace. Your dark brown is your global WIL, and this is if they've done any WIL. and then the lighter green is no will. Now we've just put the percentage points up there for any will or no will. And what we've done is we've actually put these in order. So those that agree, or sorry, that rated well or very well, that yes, my course prepared me for work or for my current role, we've done them in order. So these are the highest percentage appears on your left, going down to those on the right. And you can see, I guess, first off, the first point you can see is that there's a lot of variation between the disciplines. And if you look down at the actual that these relate to, there is something that jumps out in the sense that education, health, and engineering, we all know that for these disciplines, broadly, they have will embedded in them, it's interwoven, it's mandated, you know, and it really starts from the get-go all the way through their degree. We do acknowledge that there is some disparity between these actual 12 broad fields of education, which are defined, you know, used, they're standard and used in the GOS. So, you know, within these there might be variation, but you know, that's something that struck us. Whereas down to on the other end of the spectrum, down this end, you can see that, you know, will in these areas tends to be more bespoke. It might be more as a capstone experience, a one-off towards the end of the degree program. You know, so that I guess makes a statement in itself. While you might expect where there isn't much will for it to have a greater impact, clearly those graduates that are able to experience that interwoven mandated will through their degree, you know, clearly they feel very prepared for work, which is, you know, obviously a great result. Just moving on. So the third kind of area, we've looked at the 4 dimensions of employability, we've looked at qualification preparedness, and the other area is the graduate attributes. So this is a standard scale which has been included in the GOS for some time, and unfortunately that scale has actually been removed from the GOS. The data that we get towards the end of this year won't include the data that we see here. But the GAS has 3 different constructs to it. It has your foundation skills, which you can see listed there. It has your adaptive skills, which is, you know, something that, as we all know, is quite heavily focused upon by graduate employers who are seeking, you know, graduates who can adapt, who can work across different areas, apply their skills independently, and, you know, can contribute to innovation. And then we have our collaborative skills, which we also know very important, the whole team working piece and working with diverse others, etc. So that just, you know, highlights really what the scale is about. So the F stands for foundation, the A for adaptive, and the C is for collaboration. And then you've got your 3 different course levels there. And this is for, we're looking here at the influence again of will on those sorry, for the current role that they're in. And I'm just clarifying that is for those that are in any kind of influence. So at the different levels, we can see here, we've actually highlighted the collaborative skills because those jumped out to us. But just looking broadly, again, we can see the positive impact of will. Those that participated in any form of will, higher than those that didn't participate in any form of will. So you've got the differences can be seen here in bold, and that really goes across the board. But I suppose the one that we thought was quite interesting was really around the collaborative skills, because there seemed to be greater difference there. That actually reads 68%. So there's a 12% difference there at postgraduate level between those that participated in will and those that didn't. Just clarifying again, so these are graduates that are in any kind of employment. It could be for 1 hour a week at McDonald's, or it could be in a employment that is actually specific to their degree type. I think also something that jumped out to us as well is that irrespective of whether they completed will, these percentages are high. I mean, which is positive. So the way that this is essentially constructed is what they do. There are a number of items for each of those different 3 constructs. What the Social Research Centre does, which are the people that handle the GOS, is they look to see which graduates had an average of 3.5 over.
Oh, we've lost you again, Denise. Bonnie, we'll hand over to you.
Okay, we'll wait and see if we can get Denise back, but that's okay. Let me keep going while we wait for Denise to come back. She might come back and speak to the rest of the context behind this particular slide. So what we're looking at here is the influence of will on collaborative skills. So sorry, just going back to this slide here, and you'll see that the last column in each of the courses, which is the C, is the collaboration skills. Oh, Denise, you're back.
I'm back. I'm so sorry. Sorry to do this to you, Bonnie.
Go for it.
Okay. It's like your worst nightmare. Sorry. Okay, where was I? I was here. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, let me just pick up where I was. Apologies. So basically, the percentage wanted to be as high as possible. There's a way that the SRC classifies graduates as to whether they agree that their course developed foundation skills ready to prepare them for employment. So we want that percentage to be as high as possible. So the fact that they're high broadly is great, but we can obviously see that by doing WIL, that will increase their ratings even further. And just having a look at the different forms of WIL there, yes, there is differences, and obviously you can have a look at the slides later rather than us going through all of that in finer detail. But as I said, the collaboration skills was something in particular that jumped out to us, especially at the postgraduate research level. I mean, those, they're very high. And also for the non-workplace based, this is a story that to us said, okay, in some of the other areas, work-based WIL, global WIL seem to perform, should we say, very well in terms of employability outcomes. And the non-workplace WIL seem to be, had less impact. This was one area where we thought, okay, it actually seems to be productive or relatively strong in terms of developing graduates' collaborative skills. So just moving on there, we thought we would drill that down into the collaborative skills a bit further, and we're looking here at bachelor level. So again, very similar to the other discipline focused slide that I showed. You've got your work-based, your non-workplace, and you've got your global WIL, and you've got any WIL, and then you've got no WIL. So really we're looking at the 2 bars on the right-hand side, and you've got the percentage points there that are listed. So with this one, there is variation among the different disciplines. We found that global WIL achieved a higher percentage agreement across the board than work-based WIL, and also non-workplace WIL achieved a higher percentage across the board than work-based WIL, other than for IT. So, this is where we really found that the non-workplace WIL made a difference. In terms of the greatest difference between graduates' ratings for those that have done any WIL and no WIL, the biggest percentage difference was for management and commerce. That was just under 9% difference, followed by IT, and followed by society and culture. And really, I guess the range here highlights the value of you looking at your own institution's data, because this is fine at a national level, but what's actually happening in your own institution, because you'll have your own nuances in the programs that you offer, which are targeting skill development in these three skill clusters, I suppose. So it's really just to encourage you, to drill down and look at those. And over to you, Bonnie.
All right, we're going to wrap it up now. We've showed you all of the findings now from the analysis of data. So here's some of the key takeaways. Look, overall, I began this webinar by saying it's a good WIL story, and this certainly is a good WIL story. The data affirms positive links between WIL and employability and different aspects of employability as well, and relating to career development learning. different forms of will are particularly useful for enhancing employability, and we've seen this, although smaller numbers for our postgrad research, there's really high perceived positive from that particular group or course level. However, overall, we can still see that there's a lot of perceived positive responses from graduates on their will experiences. Will activities enhance perceptions of preparedness for future employment? And that's where we're really, that's kind of one of the things that we hope to get across in this webinar. The findings emphasise variations in the perceived value for different forms of will. Now, we know that we've broken these into 3 broad groups and that there can be many ways to classify work integrated learning. However, you would have seen as we go through, there was still some really interesting insights. For example, global will was really high in some instances, but when we looked at collaborative skills, it was actually non-workplace will and global will, which were performing really high there as well. Will is clearly links to enhancing collaborative skills, particularly global will and those in the workplace. There are notable differences as well by disciplines for the skill development and preparedness of future employment. So what we really want to get across here is that there is a positive perception of a range of work integrated learning activities that are linked to employability. So embedding work integrated learning across courses and across various disciplines is a really positive approach based on students' perceptions, their reported perceptions. And like Denise said, we really do encourage you though to go into your institutional data and see if you can dive in there and see if you can analyse that data to find out what's going on in your context.
Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, so what does that mean for all of us as practitioners, whether we're academics and professional staff, whether we're in careers and employability, centralised provision? I guess one of the first things the data shows is there is different value to be gained for different forms of will, which would then make sense to include those different forms of will for every student. So every student ideally would get to experience the non-workplace will, which might be very productive in terms of collaborative skills, because often it's team focused, whereas to give them better exposure for networking opportunities, etc., to try and incorporate some work-based will in there. The other thing that jumped out to us was really the benefit for scaffolding will through the degree, those interwoven, those disciplines which have the interwoven mandated scaffolded will seem to perform well in some areas. The other point, I guess, is around reflection, and I did raise this earlier about the disparity in outcomes. Was it around the actual design of the offering, the will offering, or was it around perhaps there being not as much reflection and sense-making experiences, which we all know is critical for student learning? And similarly for career development learning, trying to package that in to the different forms of will might also help with enhancing employability outcomes across the board. I know with our own, here in our school, with our own project-based will experiences which we have over the semester, we do kind of bookend those with career development learning activities and assessments to make sure that the students in those units, rather than doing the work-based will, get the full experience. And networking is something that perhaps is an area of focus to try and make sure that there's equity across the different types of will. If that's the intention, it might not be the intention to make sure that they're equitable.
We might just give Denise a couple of minutes.
Yes. While Denise comes back, let me pick up on the point around considering key quality principles in all will design. So as we know, there is a national framework for quality work integrated learning, and this is something that we would really want you to draw to your attention right now as well. And just if you haven't seen that framework, then that's really something that will help us examine our own will programs, and there's multiple dimensions across there for the institution and for the program itself. So what we really want to see is we really want to see will programs upholding quality principles. Oh, back to Denise.
Yeah, so sorry. This is so frustrating. Yeah, and lastly, the GOS items, just, they, hopefully you might have seen from the last webinar and this webinar, we're all busy developing our NPILF case studies and metrics, and this could provide a very, rich form of data for your NPILF metrics. It might be something that you want to consider. I can't proceed the slides. Bonnie, if you don't mind clicking forward.
Yes, go for it. This is considerations.
Yep. Okay. Right, lovely. Thank you. So I guess some caveats. We know that there are other dimensions of graduate employability. Today we've looked at qualification preparedness. We've looked at the GOS scale, and we looked at those 4 dimensions of employability around the bespoke items that ACEN developed. But yes, there are absolutely more things, like, for example, career development learning or professional identity development. The 4 to 6 month postgraduate timeline, while that can be problematic sometimes when you're looking at the influence of will on employment outcomes because of that short time frame, so they've only just arrived in the workplace. Different viewpoints on this. Some might say that the short 4 to 6 months is good in terms of when they're thinking about the value of will in terms of their employability, not employment outcomes, because they don't have recall bias. It's been quite, it wasn't that long ago. However, others might argue that actually they're really just transitioning to roles and their skills haven't been tested. I've been looking with a colleague at some data around the difference between graduate skill ratings at 6 months and then at 3 years in the GOS-L, the GOS longitudinal, and we found, some nuances there which are quite interesting. So that's just something to take into account. Also, and I did mention this in the last webinar, we have changed the wording slightly in terms of the first item and the participation in will. We used a word for credit for the data that you were seeing here, and we've actually changed that to as part of your course, because as we know, there are some forms of will, like in engineering, for example, where they might structure it so it's not for credit, but it is absolutely part of their course. And another final thing to flag is just the smaller sample size for the postgraduate research graduates. But hopefully we highlighted that through. So you obviously with a smaller sample, you have to treat the data with a bit more caution. Over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Denise. And this is our final slide, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. This is just a bit of a reflection on what ACEN is doing to support you with embedding will at the moment. So look, what we aim to do is we hope to showcase good practices. So if you have a case study that you'd love to put forward, please go to our website and explore how you can submit a case study to us that we can then showcase on our website. We also facilitate professional development opportunities, so we have critical conversations, we have these webinars, and we also have research conversations. So please engage with us around those topics, because these professional development opportunities also give you a voice. So it gives you the opportunity to talk about what you do in will, where your mind is at, what you're thinking, and an opportunity to talk to others as well in this space. We hope to support further research as well that explore some of these key takeaways. So we do also have ACEN grants. And we also are going to continue with data collection, and we hope to do that in a more of a longitudinal way, so we can look at the different patterns that happen over time and understand any changes that happen over that duration as well. So now we come to questions. So if you do have questions for us, please pop them in the chat. And Erin, I will hand over to you to moderate, please.
Great, thank you very much. The chat was very quiet, and I think, like me, I was glued to the screen there. Yan, would you like to take the microphone there? You have a question, and then we will go to Jackson.
Okay.
Erin, can I just clarify? It looks like the chat is switched off.
Yeah, that's the thing I want to mention. The chat is off.
Yes, it's turned off.
That's why it's so quiet.
Well, there we go. All right, anyone who has a question, please put your hand up and we will go through it. No problem. Sorry about that. Yan, if you wanted to go first.
Yeah, can you hear me, Erin?
You're a bit quiet.
How about now? It's better?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, my first question is related to the chat actually has been off. Sorry. So anyway, So my name is Yan. I come from RMIT, and this is my first time to join this webinar. I'm very happy to see these things going on. I didn't know this webinar since because Leonie actually from RMIT has introduced me to this fantastic, like network related to will. So my first question is, I'm not very familiar with the GOS. My question is, was this survey related to will conducted for the last year or has been done for a few years? Because in my program,
I might.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I can jump in, but I think I'm happy to speak with you offline about the GOS, but I think if there are other questions relevant to the content today, probably rather focus on those if there are any. But just briefly, the Graduate Outcome Survey is, yes, it's administered 3 times a year, but there's annual data that's released, and it's all around labour force outcomes and course experience. But we've only introduced the will items in the last 12 months. So this is the first year of data that we've had. Yeah.
Okay, so can we get
if you've got any questions around access to data methodology, just drop me an email or email ACEN. Leonie will be able to direct you, and I can answer any questions around that. That's fine.
Okay, sure. I think my second question is, as a statistician, I can see because you can show different figures, you can show some difference, but it's maybe possible you can do some statistical analysis to show they are statistically significantly different or not, because 80% is significantly better than 79%. We can do some tests to verify. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will have, at an institution level, you have access to that data. So you don't have access to the whole of the national data file, but you do have access to your own institution data to see where those differences lie. Absolutely.
Okay, good. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Yan. Jackson, if you could take the microphone if you like, and then we'll go to Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Erin, and thanks, Bonnie and Denise. Great presentation, and it's great to see this really positive data. My question is the same as the one Judy's posted actually in the chat, which is maybe if you could just talk to the definition of global will and whether this includes students who perhaps were participating in an international project that's still based in Australia. Does that count as global will? Or is that specifically students going to overseas sites and it's more workplace based?
Okay, I am just putting up, okay, I need to put the actual items. My understanding or my memory, sorry, on this is that they were given a few examples of what they actually meant. So, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the actual, I don't know if you want to move to another question while I open up the actual items.
Sure, no problem. We have some questions here from Peter in the chat. Peter, did you want to take the microphone, or would you like for me just to go through those? You have a number of them there.
I do indeed. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Very good. I think it's easier for me to paraphrase what I'm really trying to say, which is that when I first started in my role some 4 years ago, maybe being an accounting academic, I had the rather simplistic notion that internships or work experience was learning how to work, and I quickly realised after one semester it's actually working to learn. And part of the reason why I came to that is perhaps as evident by the data that's in, I think, slides 16 and 20, there is a big difference between the students that I would normally teach, which would be in commerce and management, compared to, say, students in education and health-related fields. And it's all about the fact that work experience is embedded into their curriculum, but not mine. And so I guess the 2 questions I've got could be summed up as being, one question is that do we need to start rethinking about how and what we teach in some disciplines? Commerce and management would be the classic example, but we could also look into the humanities, where there's a better connection between what we teach in the classroom and what actually happens in the workplace.
That's a big question.
Someone who wants to try and tackle that one.
Well,
in her role at ACEN, I'd like to try.
There'll be differing viewpoints on that. I mean, that really extends to vocationalisation of higher education, and there'll be a lot of resistance among some academics to say that we should be designing our curriculum entirely to prepare students for what happens in the workplace. Some might consider that professional degrees such as teacher education, you know, things like allied health, speech therapy, occupational therapy, yes, they should be designed for what's happened in the workplace. But there's many others that believe in, you know, liberal arts education, and the whole greater purpose of higher education is to develop students for, you know, critical thinking and develop their cognitive skills, and not to design our curriculum solely around what industry wants. And that you know, there is an ongoing debate about that, and I think people have their own personal perspectives on that as well. So, but I mean, I guess going back to the slides and the data, I guess the important thing to remember is that the data was positive in terms of skill development anyway across the, you know, different areas. It's just, I guess it just, there are nuances by discipline, but whether you want to design your whole curriculum around preparing students for contemporary work, which is always evolving anyway, is I guess a contentious topic. It's one for debate.
Yeah. Can I just?
Bonnie might have something to add.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for bringing this question up as well. I completely agree with Denise, and I think there's a cautionary tale to say that all students must engage in work integrated learning. I think there is spaces where students can have access to work integrated learning, but I think the thing that the more that I read, the more that I work with our institution at a strategic level, is what we would love to see is this scaffold approach across a course. So having one WIL opportunity right at the end, it may be valuable, but I also think we need to, as course teams, think about how we can do WIL opportunities, smaller pockets, relevant opportunities for students to apply their knowledge and skills across the course. Of course, in those degrees which don't have a clear or named pathway into a profession, I think we need to really be mindful of the nuances and the context in which educators are teaching within these degrees, and not go in there and say WIL is the answer, but go in there and say, can WIL assist students to apply knowledge in these spaces? So that's what I think.
Just offer a comment. I didn't mean to suggest it was a black or white or binary choice, and as you suggest, both of you, there are nuances in how we might approach it. Certainly in education and health sciences, I guess by nature of their discipline, it's pretty much integrated or embedded right throughout the curriculum. And I agree with you, you know, in other disciplines that's not going to work. But I think the other part of the survey that you picked up was around the skill development, which I refer to as being transferable skills. We don't seem to be really doing that much with it, and that's probably the area where we need to do more, say, for example, in commerce and management. But I've taken up enough, so thanks, ladies, for your contribution.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for that. And you know, that discussion could be a whole webinar in itself as such. Denise, did you want to comment on the categories of global WIL? I note that Julia put those in the chat, but did you want to comment further on that?
No, just, I mean, they're there. What we did with this is we gave students, remembering that these are, you know, short items, and if they're too lengthy, then basically graduates just don't proceed with the items after that. So to prevent fallout, we gave them the name, as in WIL not based in the workplace, or workplace-based WIL, or global WIL experience, brackets with examples. And so the global WIL experience examples are in the chat, as you can see. And yes, it's never perfect in terms of classifying them, but that's what we went with.
And Jackson, with your recent comment there, that's exactly how I'm interpreting it as well. So your non-workplace based experiences, where it's an international case study as such, they wouldn't be counted in that category. Is that correct, Denise?
Yes, that is correct. That's correct.
Okay. Can I just ask, so there was obviously quite a high perception of the benefit of global will, but did I interpret the data obviously in terms of the actual attendance or undertaking of that global will? It was much, much smaller compared to the other will in the workplace and non-workplace experiences, yes?
Yes, it was. If you
Yep.
so, I mean, yeah, it was. You can see the participation relative. Don't have the exact. So here, in terms of percentage points, so for undergraduate level, it's just under 10% that participate in global will, just under 6% for postgraduate coursework, and 3% for postgraduate research. So
Yeah.
yes, you're absolutely right, Erin. The numbers are smaller. I mean, the big players are. Postgraduate research, it's smaller anyway, as we can see there on that slide, but the work-based will is where we get most of the responses from. We're quite careful, that's why we drill down at a bachelor level rather than at the other levels, just so you've got enough data there to draw any kind of conclusions from.
Okay, great. We might just ask one more question and then close it off for the day. So Mark has a question in relation to interpreting the meaning of self-perception, and are there limits to measuring impact of will solely on this measure as such? It might be a bit too big for this presentation, Denise, but do you have any comments on that?
So, sorry, what was the question? Is it in the chat? I can't see it, sorry.
It is. So it's, if you scroll up, just before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How do we interpret the meaning of self-perception in terms of outcome? Are there limits to measuring impact of will solely on self-perception? Is there a way to? Yeah, I know, absolutely. This is graduate self-perception on what the activity has done for them, essentially, focusing on our 4 different dimensions. And as we know, self-report data and using that as a proxy for actual development is problematic. So in terms of other measures, yes, ideally combining self-perceptions with, let's say we're talking about skill development and we're actually looking at will students, yes, you can get them to do their own pre and post self-assessment, for example, of different capabilities, or it could be against the GOS scale. But then you've got the workplace supervisor also evaluating against the same scale, for example, and then you could have the academic as well. So yes, there are limits on their own self-perception, and there is also that time issue as well. So this is them they're 4 to 6 months in the workplace. They might not be in a challenging role, for example. So their perceptions of how well their skills have been developed and how will might have helped with that might be quite different to 2 years later when they're in a very demanding role and they've got a better sense of or the demands or the expectations of industry on on skills and what the standards should be as a graduate. I hope that helps. Bonnie might have more to add.
That's great. Bonnie, if you don't have anything more, I might just stop the recording here.